Quote, "It is imperative that the privacy of the American people be protected from an increasingly invasive government." This is from Jones, Walter Jones. Quote, "Without the proper restraint, there is potential for drones to be used to spy on Americans in violation of their constitutional rights." We're also going to talk to Walter Jones about his thoughts on evacuating all foreign combat troops from Afghanistan in 2014. So we have Walter Jones on the Black Tower Show. Mr. Walter Jones, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Glad to do it.
Walter Jones, U.S. Representative for North Carolina's 3rd Congressional District, serving since 1995. You're a member of the Republican Party. And I first want to talk about this legislation that you're co-sponsoring that would prohibit the federal government from using drone surveillance against U.S. citizens without a legally obtained warrant. Me and Jake, well, it sounds fair to me. Can you tell us about this this legislation here?
Well, if you remember, or your listeners might remember, that a couple of years ago in the National Defense Authorization Act, there was language put in by the United States Senate that basically gave the authority to a president, that if a president determined that there was an American citizen that he, I'm sure with some advisors, saw as a terrorist, then they could go after him. And this, to me, is just another example of the overreach by the federal government into the civil liberties of the American people. And I joined this legislation introduced by Mr. Scott of Georgia because what the subtitle says, and this is exactly what it does, to protect individual privacy against unwarranted governmental intrusion through the use of the unmanned aerial vehicles commonly called drones and for other purposes.
How many drones are in the skies right now?
Well, we know that a good friend of mine is a former state judge in Texas, and he's a member of Congress and a very dear friend of mine named Ted Poe. And about the last few weeks we were in Congress before we broke for the election, we both were doing a 5-minute speech. Mine was to get out of Afghanistan, and his was to talk about the increased use of drones in our own country. And he said in a couple of years, somewhere around 2015, 2016, there could be as many as 17,000 drones in the air over America.
Oh, my God.
So this is why I think Mr. Scott's bill is very important. Because, again, whether it be a Democrat or Republican in the White House, the point is that there's too much power, in my opinion, in the executive office, and we in Congress have to certainly try to protect the civil liberties of the American people. And so I felt like this was really good, sound legislation, and saw this as a benefit to the American people trying to protect their independence.
What do you think the honest intent of the people that are making these drones? Is it based in the fact that our country, these people want to protect us? Do we need this protecting, or do you think it has to do with making money off of buying these drones? Or what's the real intent behind even having drones? I mean, is it really for our safety?
Well, my feeling is it's twofold. Yes, safety could be part of it, but it's also a way to spy on the American people. And I'm not an extremist. You can look at my record of 18 years. I'm a centrist. I'm a conservative Republican, but not an extremist. And I've just continued to see, beginning under George Bush and then the expansion under President Obama, I began to see more and more intrusion by the federal government. I'm a very close friend of Ron Paul, and I share his concerns about civil liberties.
I'd say with Ron Paul now leaving Congress, you are the best person in Congress, and I'd like to thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, you're kind. I've learned a lot from my friend Ron Paul, and I can honestly say that there's no one better. I wish he could have gotten the nomination, but that didn't happen, so I don't guess we need to relive that. But he is certainly a man who, in my opinion, lives and casts his votes strictly based on his understanding of the Constitution, and I have great admiration for him.
Yeah, we certainly aren't happy with Jesse Benton here at the Black Tower Show after what he did there. But do you see this as a slippery slope like I do? Like with the mosquito potential drones, beetle drones? I mean, people really won't know if they're being watched or not maybe in 20 years, 10 years, whatever.
Well, I share your concern for this reason because, I look at the fact that President Obama bypassed Congress to bomb Libya. Look at Libya now. It's falling apart. It's a civil war. Look at President George Bush. We had no business going into Iraq. That was all about where the weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein didn't even have them. Look at Iraq. It's falling apart. That's why I want to get our troops out of Afghanistan. We've had 3 Marines down here in Camp Lejeune. That's in my district. And about 6 weeks ago, 3 Marines from Special Ops were shot and killed by the people they were helping to train. That's why I was really pleased to be on your show to talk about the drones, but also want to talk a little bit about Afghanistan if we can.
Let's go into that. I want to get your thoughts on the evacuation of all foreign combat troops, like you alluded to, from Afghanistan 2014.
Well, I'm actually trying to reach out to, since I'm a Republican, the Romney people, and suggesting to him that he take a public position of saying if he should become the president, that he'll start bringing the troops out in the summer of 2013, because we're talking about 2014, that's 2 more years of, because it's late December of 2014, so that's 24 months. How many more young men and women have to die and lose their legs? And Jake, if I can share with you, I can't say his name, but the former commandant has been my advisor for 3 years on Afghanistan, and he just asked me not to publicly say his name because active duty generals don't care what retired generals think. But this former commandant, 3 weeks ago, in a response to an email I sent him, I'll read this very quickly. At the end of the day, I am more convinced than ever that we need to get out of Afghanistan. When our friends turn out to be our enemy, it is time to pull the plug. The idea that troops we have trained and equipped now turn that training and equipment on us is simply unconscionable. Whether we leave tomorrow or 1,000 tomorrows from now, nothing will really change. We are now nothing more than a recruiting poster for every malcontent in the Middle East. We need to wake up. And that's the former commandant of the Marine Corps.
What are we even doing there? Osama bin Laden is dead? What are our troops doing in Afghanistan right now?
Well, the troops are very frustrated. I have interacted with many of the returning Marines down at Camp Lejeune in my district, and I'll tell you another quick story very quickly. They don't know. I've been to Walter Reed when I've had young Marines and Army to tell me, why are we still in Afghanistan? And as recently as last week, we had a young African-American member of the United States Army. He and 2 of his comrades were shot and killed, again, by the Afghans they were training. And I went to the wake of this young man and happened to run into the 2 Army escorts that escorted the body to Greenville, North Carolina. The young man that was killed was named Joshua Nelson, private. And I talked to the young major, and I said, Major, I want to tell you, I am doing everything I can with a few Republicans and more Democrats to get y'all out of Afghanistan. And he looked up at me, Jake, and he said, thank you, we're ready to come home.
Is this about resource preservation? Is that why we're there, do you think?
You know why I think we're there? Because it helps the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. I think it helps those in Washington raise money from the military-industrial complex. I hate to say that, but I feel it, and I might as well say it. I don't know why we're there. There is absolutely nothing that we're going to change. That's what the Commandant said. If we leave today or if we leave in 2014, it's going to be the same issue. Karzai is a corrupt leader. We send $10 billion a month. We are a financially broke nation. We're borrowing that money from foreign governments to pay him $10 billion a month. And there's a book, and if you have not had the author on, I can help you get him on, called Funding the Enemy by Douglas Wissing, W-I-S-S-I-N-G. And if you say, Walter, I'd like to get him on, I can call him Monday and get him to contact you. And that book's subtitle is, the title is Funding the Enemy, How U.S. Taxpayers Are Funding the Taliban. And he gives wonderful examples, sad examples, of how the money is supposed to be going to the Afghan chiefs and in the tribes. Ends up they pay the Taliban for protection to buy weapons to kill the Americans. It's time for the American people to raise Cain with Congress to get them out before 2014.
What do you tell to people that are possibly on the fence of who they should vote for in this upcoming election? You talked about Romney. Is there a president Is there a man that is going to help us end this thing?
Well, I reached out to the Romney campaign. I am a Republican, and I have had a contact as of Friday, and I was telling the gentleman he's a former ambassador in the Reagan administration, and he and I talked, and he's going to get back with me Monday, and I told him that Mr. Romney could help himself if he would announce that he's going to bring the troops home in the summer of 2013. The American people are tired of this war. They're frustrated, and they're tired of sending money, borrowed money to Karzai.
Of course, the troops might be replaced with drones, let's say.
Well, that I don't know. I'm more interested in saving lives and limbs than anything else. The history's shown no great nation that ever went into Afghanistan, including Alexander the Great, that thought they were going to change that country. They never changed it, and it will never be changed. I can honestly tell you that from classified briefings and news reports, the Taliban will eventually be the leaders of Afghanistan. It won't be Karzai. He can't survive.
Afghanistan, from what I've read, is a pretty much unrulable place by anyone.
Absolutely.
Karzai really is just the mayor of Kabul. That's really the only thing they can control. Am I right here?
You're 100% correct. I've had so many in the military, and again, the commandant I just read to you and your listeners. I mean, there's nothing we're going to change there. We got bin Laden. You mentioned this earlier. If I could have been an advisor to President Obama, I would have said, Mr. President, declare victory and bring him out. I mean, obviously, you and I know and your listeners know that when you start bringing 70,000 troops out of any country, you don't just do it in 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. It takes several months to start bringing them out. Right. But I don't know why I've seen 5 kids that have no body parts below their waist. They were at Walter Reed. Everything below their waist is gone, and they're living.
Congressman, are you worried about Americans seeing a perceived less cost of war by having these unmanned drones out there that are being flown by no human? There's no real risk for an American to die in that situation. So there's really no perceived cost of war by the typical American. Are you worried about that moving forward into the future?
Well, yes, to this degree. This just like this war in Afghanistan, it's very seldom is a name of a dead soldier or Marine in the paper. Very seldom. There are some from time to time flag-draped coffins coming off the planes at Dover. And if you start having drones doing the fighting, then it might not ever be in the paper that there have been people killed or what. I mean, so there is a concern. I think that the international community at some point in time is going to be looking into and analyzing drones, whether it be from England or America.
Our guest on the Black Tower Show, Walter Jones, U.S. Representative for North Carolina's 3rd Congressional District, serving since 1995, member of the Republican Party. We talked about you co-sponsoring this legislation and also the evacuation of all foreign combat troops from Afghanistan 2014. If you'd like to call in, the number is 585-637-7040. Broadcasting 1590 AM WASB, 1310 AM WRSB. Mr. Walter Jones, we talk a lot about NDAA on our show.
Yes, sir.
And there's been some recent moves against NDAA to make parts of it illegal, specifically those parts that say that our government has the right to detain American citizens until, quote, the end of hostilities. What do you come out on NDAA?
Well, I supported that amendment. I believe it was Justin Amash and a Democrat, Adam Smith, from the state of Washington. I believe that during the debate, they both offered an amendment. It was defeated, but it was a very close vote. I don't have those numbers before me, but I'm going to say the best I remember that vote was somewhere around 15 to 20 votes against. And no, it was a debate that Justin and Adam had on the floor, and during the NDAA bill, the National Defense Authorization Act in the House, I think this goes back to June. I could stand to be corrected on that. But yes, there are more and more members of Congress are concerned because, rightly so, the American people are beginning to learn about the things we're doing in Washington, particularly as it relates to civil liberties.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't know who Justin Amash is, he's a very good congressman out of Michigan.
Absolutely.
Liberty-loving congressman. I'm a fan of him. He's a young guy, but he's coming up.
Yep.
Do you think that the government is already using NDAA against Americans?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, and that's not a great answer. I realize that, but I cannot tell you anymore because, again, I have voted against every reauthorization of the Patriot Act. I made a mistake when President Bush was the president, and I regret it very much. Two votes. One was to send the troops to Iraq, an unnecessary war, and the second was the Patriot Act. But ever since that time, and I learned what was in it, I voted against every reauthorization of the Patriot Act because I think it goes too far and it endangers our constitutional rights. And so I'm very concerned about the intrusion of the federal government. I just feel like there's just more and more opening the door by Congress because we're not meeting our responsibility to the checks and balances of the executive branch.
What do you say to people that claim there's a consolidation of power in our government, almost a group of elite people? Like we had Jeff Charlotte on. He talked about the family. We talked about C Street. Talked about these groups of people that have enormous influence. What do you say to people that make these claims that it might be a small group of elite people that are guiding legislation? Is that even a feasible thing to say?
Yes, and I tell you what compounded that was the Citizens United.
Right.
You see all this money in the hands of a very few, and they pick their candidate who they want to win, then that to me is a threat on a freedom of a country.
Walter Jones, you're dangerous. You're dangerous, man.
So what really ends up happening is these presidential candidates end up just kind of submitting their plan to these group of elites, and the election itself, trying to gather votes from the people, it's just a PR extravaganza and really nothing more.
I don't disagree with you. I have seen for so long the whole system. I spoke today in my district to a group of retired veterans talking about my concerns about sequestration, but in the course of the questions, I actually got a question from one of these retired veterans who said to me, he said, "Is all this money necessary?" I said, "Sir, this money is all about power in Washington. And who can raise the most money figures they can buy the power. But also, when you raise the money, you're raising it from an individual or some type of group. Well, do you owe them something? Probably so. It's a system that I probably won't live long enough, but it needs to change. It's just all about raising money and who can raise the most."
Right.
I've often wondered myself, when Barack Obama raised $1 billion in 2008, I kept saying to myself, what does that $1 billion buy these people? What does he owe these people? Is he going to do anything he said he did on the campaign trail, and it turned out that he did nothing he said on the campaign trail?
Well, he did negative. He brought pain.
Yeah,
He brought
exactly.
pain.
You know, Ron Paul has raised probably the most money from individuals of any of the major candidates, truthfully, in the last 8 years. I don't know those numbers, but I do know that he gets so much of his money from the $25, the $100, the $500. People just go on the internet. But the majority of his money, probably 99%, no, I go 95% of Ron Paul's money comes from individuals.
All right.
That's awesome.
Walter Jones, our guest on the Black Tower Show. I just wanted to get your feedback real quick on Mitt Romney. There was this recording that came out where he was talking about the 47%. We all know about it, made big news. But I wanted to get your feedback on when we're talking about cutting things like Medicare and Medicaid, and people, I mean, our listeners, a lot of them, including myself to some degree, don't fully understand exactly what's going to happen as far as Medicare and Medicaid and those sort of things and self-entitlement, and all these words are getting thrown around. Can you kind of simplify it for our listeners? What is the Republican Party? Does the Republican Party have a unified idea on where Medicare and Medicaid and things like that will go?
Well, I joined Ron Paul and did not vote for the Ryan budget. There were 4 of us. I think Justin Amash also voted no, and there are a number of reasons for that. But now I want to get that out before I get to and give you an answer. Right. My thinking is that the real test for America's future is coming in 2013. Whether Romney wins or Obama wins, we have kicked the can down the road to the point there is no more road to kick it. And Ron Paul has convinced me, and my own reading and listening to people like yourselves, I believe sincerely that 2013 is the crossroads. Either the American people are going to demand Congress to make the toughest decisions Congress has made since the Depression, or we're going to just see America head for a total collapse. I was told by one of the veterans today, I had not heard that, but that the federal government has had fewer and fewer countries to buy our financial instruments, so now the federal government's going to buy its own instruments. That in itself, I wasn't clear exactly what he said, but I think I'm close to what he said this morning, and I said, well, I've not heard that, but I'm not surprised. It's just one more step of trying to pump up a country that continues to borrow money from foreign governments. You know that right now we are paying nearly $1 billion a day just to pay the interest on the national debt.
Oh, my goodness.
Almost $1 billion a day.
When we hear stories about QE forever, I mean, is this another sign of an upcoming collapse?
In my opinion, it could be. I have to believe that when a country is so weak that it is sending money to train foreigners to take American jobs, and that's another issue, I guess, another time. But my thinking is absolutely that this country has 1 year. My analogy to the people I speak to every time I speak publicly is we're on a 12-hour clock. We are in the 11th hour of 12 hours.
Walter Jones, our guest on the Black Tower Show. Thank you so much, Mr. Walter Jones. We'd love to have you back on again.
Well, can I ask you, would you like for me to ask Douglas Whistler to call you and set up for him to tell your listeners just how bad it is in Afghanistan?
Honestly, that would be great. We would love that interview.
We'll take care of that Tuesday morning. I'll do that for you.